They got a series of B and C players and a draft pick. Chris Paul, who the Clippers thought was leaving Los Angeles, that was their feel, decided to get something in return. Cannot blame him here. They got a draft pick and some average off-the-bench guys. Patrick Beverley I like, certainly as a backup point guard. He may start for them now. Chris Paul is now, along with James Harden, part of an exciting Houston Rockets team. I'll say it again, aggressive wins in the NBA. Danny Ainge has been patient. 22 draft picks, no stars. Houston's been aggressive, 2 stars. And this from Jeff Goodman at my former employer. Rockets general manager Daryl Morey is not done yet. Sources tell ESPN. Harden and Chris Paul, they will try and add a 3rd star to compete with the Warriors. This from our Chris Broussard. Jerry West was not in yesterday's meeting between Chris Paul and the Clippers. Sam Amick, USA Today reporter, and a good one. It's a double whammy for the Clippers. CP3 isn't leaving if he truly believes LeBron is coming next summer. That prospect is done. Also, let's note, there's a story out there that a source said that LeBron was not going to consider the Clippers. That came out late yesterday. LeBron obviously telling Chris Paul he just couldn't go there. The chaotic history, despite some recent success, much more defined team than the crosstown Lakers. But the Lakers are a big brand, and the Clippers are not. It takes a long time to gain a reputation and a long time to lose a reputation. And the Lakers are still, despite their chaos for 4 years, seen as the premier team in town. And the Clippers, despite their 4 years of growth and some smart moves, are seen as a second-class team in this town. Chris Paul leaves. LeBron wasn't coming. They reboot. This also tells you why Jerry West was hired. You need his eyeballs in the room and his experience and gravitas. Okay, the Knicks. And as this story breaks, I'll keep updating you. Chris Paul to the Rockets. Phil Jackson and the Knicks, that was going to be our lead story today, have parted. Phil Jackson has been fired. My first takeaway is when 2 crazy people get a divorce and go their separate ways, there's still 2 crazy people out there. James Dolan, the owner of New York Knicks basketball, is the worst owner in American pro sports. His daddy gave him millions, and he's more concerned about being in a band. B, Phil Jackson, stubborn, arrogant, 71-year-old guy walking around New York mumbling something about the triangle to himself. He's got a disease, and it's called arrogance. He thinks he's smarter than everybody. The Knicks have 1 star, Kristaps Porzingis, and he is terrific. But they need multiple pieces, to even be a decent team in the East. Right now, they're awful. And they have no extra draft picks in the next 2 years. So they have to nail their first-round picks. Good luck with that. Let's wrap a bow around the Phil Jackson New York Knicks marriage. Many claimed it was a money grab. And my gut feeling initially was, nah, Phil's got a lot of money. He cares about this team. But in the end, to some degree, it was a money grab. Because the definition of money grab is taking a lot of money and not putting in the work. Here's Jeff Goodman.
Well, as an executive, as a laughingstock, a lazy, general manager, president who really didn't get out there and grind it on the road, watching, scouting, evaluating players. I talked to him recently at the draft combine, and he seems so out of touch.
This was doomed from the start for 3 reasons. Number 1 is he was a late 60-year-old. This is a travel prohibitive job that takes a great deal of energy. Number 2 is he'd never been an executive. Number 3, the Knicks are so toxic to begin with, you can't get great coaches. You can't get great scouts. You don't get great executives. This is a toxic environment, and it was before Phil was there, and it will remain as Phil leaves. This is what happens in New York. I talked about this last week. The Knicks, the Jets, the Islanders, the Brooklyn Nets. Once you start getting into that rebuild, firing, chaos, average ownership, in the end, the Knicks may get a better GM, but it won't solve their reputation. It won't solve their roster. It won't solve James Dolan's incompetence. Never forget that Steve Kerr was Phil Jackson's first choice to be the coach. But he chose the Warriors not because he didn't like New York or its fans. He chose Golden State, despite his friendship with Phil Jackson, because he didn't respect James Dolan. Just because two crazy people get a divorce doesn't mean they're still not crazy. The Knicks' problems were there before Phil Jackson, and they remain there. And this roster is a mess. Joakim Noah, untradeable, awful contract. Porzingis doesn't like the owner either. Derrick Rose, I guess you can get rid of him, but he can't shoot. Oh, yeah, Carmelo Anthony doesn't want to leave, but if you really want to be a player and start over, he must. Phil Jackson leaving doesn't solve 90% of the New York Knicks problems. The lead story today, Chris Paul is now a Houston Rocket. Christine and I both last week didn't necessarily buy into all the trade rumors, so I think it's fair to say I was surprised.
Or not trade rumors, but him leaving in free agency. We thought that was maybe him posturing to try to get the roster that he wanted with the Clippers, and maybe that was true, and then he realized it wasn't going to happen and got fed up and decided to leave.
Yeah, I was surprised when the news came down.
I was too. Mostly because, and I said this yesterday, I don't see how it's going to work with James Harden. Those are two guys that like to have the ball in their hands. So how is this going to work?
Yeah.
Because that was an issue with the Clippers. People thought that Chris was a ball hog and wouldn't pass. So how's it going to work now?
Is that because Chris Paul didn't trust Blake Griffin or DeAndre Jordan to hit a 12-footer? Chris Paul, a very high IQ basketball player, now is going to arguably the best shooter in the league. Does Chris Paul now, when he steps on the floor, think, oh, I trust my teammate?
Yeah, and maybe both players have matured, and James realizes that he's going to need some help, and so does Chris.
Yeah. I think Houston's going to be really interesting. Ryan Anderson can play. He's expensive, but they've got a great bench player, an unbelievable backcourt. They've got real talent. I do think Chris Paul can take and ease some of the burden of being the only star on that team. Now the media can go to Chris Paul. Now the media can concentrate on Chris Paul. Now the stories are not all about Harden. They can be about Chris Paul. I think that's part of this, too. Christine with the news.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herd Line News.
A number of teams are targeting Andre Iguodala in an attempt to knock off the Warriors. So rather than kind of go and build up their own team, they're just going to try and pick from the Warriors. Those teams include the Timberwolves, the Spurs, Clippers, 76ers, Magic, Nets, and Utah Jazz. So he's obviously getting a lot of interest. He was making he was on a contract that was 4 years, $48 million previously. Now, Kevin Durant, why this is interesting, Kevin Durant opted out of his contract. And he said that he is going to wait until towards the end of free agency to decide what his new contract will be. If he does get the max and he gets $36 million a year starting next year, the Warriors then have to clear up some cap space, which would mean that they could not re-sign Andre Iguodala. However, if Durant takes less, it's possible that Iguodala could come back because the Warriors have his bird rights. But if he were to leave and go to another team, he would probably get somewhere within $20 million. And the deals that he's been talking about with the Warriors have been between 8 and 12. So it's going to be interesting to see, A, if Durant is willing to take less money.
Okay,
he would only be able to do probably like a 20% raise, and whether Iguodala is willing to say goodbye to potentially $8 million in order to stay with the championship team.
This goes back to the California taxes. So Iguodala can make, $8 million in this state. In Houston, could Houston talk?
Well, he's not going to Houston. The only team, if you're talking Texas, that would be the Spurs. All the other teams, they have taxes. So if he goes to the Spurs, fine, we can use that argument.
Well, the Rockets don't have taxes.
Yeah, but he's not going to the Rockets. The Rockets are not interested in him as of right now.
Yeah, well,
this is Iguodala.
You sure?
That's what's going on right now. It sounds like the Rockets probably have bigger hopes on the horizons.
Yeah, Andre Iguodala's made $120 million. I would want to go to a winner.
I always say, though, at what point of money that you're making, is it like, I could just take or leave that $8 million. Like, I still think that money matters to these guys.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, when we talk about taxes, I think that sometimes plays a factor. Championships also play a factor. Lifestyle plays a factor. But I do think, like, we're talking $8-10 million, that still matters to them, regardless of the fact he's made 120.
These guys retire at 36, 37. They got 50 more years to live.
Right. And as you know, the more money you make, the more people you're paying.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful with your money. The Celtics are reportedly trying to add both Paul George and Gordon Hayward. This is what I've been saying the entire time. I think they're going to try to sign Gordon Hayward in free agency. I think they have a good chance at it. I think it makes a lot of sense. And then if that is the case, it makes sense now to think short-term rather than long-term, try to trade to get Paul George. You don't know whether or not he's going to stay or leave for free agency in a year, but it might be worth the risk.
By the way, Houston doesn't know if Chris Paul's going to stay or leave within the year. He just has a one-year deal in Houston, so why not just go for it? I mean, again, it's one thing if Danny Ainge had 4 draft picks and didn't want to give them up. When you've got 13, it'd be like let's say I had something of value. I had 7. I like cars. If I had 1 car, I wouldn't give it up to get something. But if I had 7, I'd give you 2 cars. Like at some point, if you've got 13 draft picks, I'd give you 4 to get a great player. Now, I'm not going to give you 8. But again.
But you're talking about these draft picks as if they're all just the same. They're not. And they do have a plan for their future. You think that they're just stockpiling all these picks for no reason. They have a plan. They just want to see it out. And really, it makes sense. Why would you plan for right now if you're not going to beat LeBron? You might as well plan for the future and longevity rather than a shotgun move that will help you for 1 year and you're not even going to win.
I think, isn't that what Houston's doing?
But Houston has the pieces to win right now, and that's why they're saying, all right, we're going to give up our young talent because now we see that we just got Chris Paul. Now it makes sense to get Paul George. It's the same thing that the Celtics are saying. If we can get Gordon Hayward, now let's try to get Paul George.
What if Gordon Hayward says no?
Then that changes everything, and then the Celtics go back to their long-term plan, as they should.
Yeah, I think they should go get better. I think they should trade for Porzingis.
But you're making it seem like it's that easy. It's not that easy.
If you called Phil and said, I'll give you 4 picks for...
So they're going to give up 4 picks
Who cares?
Porzingis. And then what happens?
Porzingis
They'll finish second, third in the East.
Porzingis is a star.
So?
They don't have one.
So? What does a star do for you? They already sell tickets. They're already a great team. People love them.
A star makes you better.
It doesn't beat LeBron.
I think LeBron's going...
You think Kristaps Porzingis is going to be the difference in beating LeBron James?
I think Kristaps Porzingis will be arguably the best player in the East in 2 years because LeBron's leaving.
Okay.
I don't think LeBron's staying in Cleveland. I don't.
Okay.